Alright friends, welcome back to another episode of Tactical Enlightenment. Today we continue on our series that I'm showing the advanced tactic known as the kill box. Today's battle was kind of a perfect example of where there's not an initial kill box scenario set up by the battle, but as the battle progressed you'll see that the right environment resulted in a perfect kill box. If you're not familiar with the kill box, I'll cover a little bit in the prelude of this battle. But it's essentially an extreme concentration of your force to annihilate a major enemy component of their army, right? Typically their infantry, sometimes it's their cavalry and infantry, but the idea is to essentially lure them in and trap them with this nasty kill box. This battle also resembles a little bit of what I've seen running around YouTube or just even history is known as a false gap strategy. False gap strategy was sort of perfected in the early Greek and Roman wars, and the idea is essentially to have the infantry line open up a center that the enemy feels is a vulnerability, that they can try to turn your flank, have the enemy attack your lines, and this open center area directly behind it you position shock troops then to combine attacks to annihilate the enemy. I've used the false gap a few times. I've used some variations of it, and honestly I find this a lot more effective, but of course you and your own experiences may be different. In any way, I'll give a demonstration of that. Generally what you have in a false gap is you have your shock troops charge through the middle and attack the enemy where the false gap was then penetrated. Shock troops, some people have asked, what does that mean? Well, that means your troops that don't have a lot of defense but have nasty two-handed weapons. Like that's your Manavliatons, that's your Sturgian heroic berserker type units, anybody wielding a two-handed weapon in a sense. So at the beginning of this battle I was just sort of feeling my way out. Usually the aserai is very aggressive, but I didn't want them to aggressively take this hill and then be shooting down on me, right? If at all possible, you want to hold the high ground, and when your enemy is threatening to take the high ground, you want to do one of either two things. You either want to retreat away from the high ground or try to seize that high ground by force, right? Rush up to it and aggressively get in there to take that high ground. In this case, I came up and met their forces with a line of heavy cavalry and heavy infantry, and what resulted is this cool little sort of jousting experience that you see in front of you there. It was a mix of our cavalry and infantry hiding behind shields, throwing their spears and other projectile weapons. Meanwhile, the cavalry on the side here were skirmishing. Right, so you can see the cavalry line there and my archers behind them sort of holding strong shield lines. It's really kind of like a standoff at the OK Corral. Right? Neither side was willing to aggressively push in, and we had this skirmish going on the outside of it. Now, the aserai had a much larger infantry force than I did. I had something like 100 infantry in this battle. And being aware of that, I did not want to have a head-to-head battle with the aserai main vanguard. If you haven't fought the aserai much yet, you soon will, and you will learn that their infantry is savage. They have very tough infantry. Their shield-bearing infantry is tough. They have very good javelin skills, and their two-handed weapon skills are outstanding. Their palace guard two-handed axemen are lethal. Just to add a little bit more narration here, what I did here is with their archers sideswiping us here, I brought my cavalry over in a line to effectively chase him off our flank. Right? You don't want the enemy flanking you. You want to be the one flanking. Right? So the standoff continued here. Mind the gore. There's going to be some gore on this. We've got a dismember mod, which I'm rather fond of. I actually encourage you to check it out because in battle like this there would definitely be dismemberments happening. So in this battle the standoff continued, but what I was hoping at some point there goes another hit, what I was hoping at some point is that the enemy would start to charge me and we could use our superior speed and archers to then dissect and destroy their main vanguard. Right? I don't want to fight it directly. I want to heavily weaken it, and we're going to perform effectively a feint retreat and then a kill box. A feint retreat is where you're not actually retreating out of fear or because you're losing. You're retreating because you want the enemy to think that you're in fear. You want the enemy to actually attack you because you have greater plans involved. And you essentially pull back and the enemy, smelling blood, chases after you. Right, so I've began that process. I'm pulling my archer units back. I have my main shock troop division right there, as you might call it. That's my 8th Corps, right? A lot of those guys are two-handed weapon. They're beasts. A lot of them have shields, but there are also a lot of them that don't, right? So now what I'm doing is on the 2 flanks, I'm forming a little bit of a V-shaped pattern for the enemy to charge into, right? Their infantry is charging down that hill. I've got the 1st Infantry spread out in a thin line on the left. And then on the right, I have my 8th Corps and my skirmishers. Meanwhile, we have archer flanks on both the sides as well, raining arrows into their approaching infantry, right? Their infantry at this stage is holding back while their archers do a little work, but I have more archers. I have nastier archers, and of course, when you fly in like this and do damage and interrupt them, the enemy's taking a beating, and a lot of times those archers will either retreat or they'll do what happened in this stage, where they decided to send their infantry in instead. Right, their archers are still a threat, but they wanted to essentially come to grips with us with this huge slug of infantry. You can see it's like 5 or 6 men deep. Every other guy has a huge two-handed axe. A very nasty infantry corps. Now I like running through on the approach and just, taking out as many guys as I can, because I'm trying to slow their movement, right? This is all about us delaying the enemy. So in this case, I'm pulling my infantry and archer corps both back, because I'm widening the net here, right? You see them charging down right into the midst of it. What they're not really aware of, even if they're a human opponent, is we now effectively surround them, right? They are running in, to give you an analogy, to the bottom of the V, right? And we have enemies on both sides. Now that they're close enough, it's an all attack, right? We are sending in everybody. It's both infantry lines, both archer lines, and the wicked 8th Corps. The only distinction this is from a normal kill box is that I don't have cavalry behind them, and that's because I need to deal with those archers on the hill. As soon as I have a second here, I'm going to command the 2nd Cavalry, and this is important. See that big long line of archers? I command a cavalry line to go up there and shield wall, and all they're doing up there, not attacking even, I just want them up there distracting that archer corps of the enemy, right? That way we can come to grips and annihilate this enemy vanguard. You see the cavalry up there, they're being shot at now. Some of the arrows are still getting through to our troops, but those cavalry, basically, they all look like porcupines. They are just absolutely covered in arrows and absorbing, all these shots that would normally be hitting my army. Sometimes they get turned around, you have to manually control them. So now that their infantry is destroyed, obviously the next step is to wipe out this archer stretch, right? You can hit them with some javelins at distance, but what I have doing now is having my men advance, and they're almost like a running back behind a lineman. You can see the cavalry just pushing their hole through into these archers, and then the infantry follow, right? This prevents our guys from getting shot to pieces by arrows, and now it's an all attack again, right? It's not a kill box, but this is a concentrated attack where it's all of our units just barreling through and annihilating their archer corps, right? These are not easy archers to go through. These are master archers, a lot of them. Very strong melee skills, right? Even if they pull out their sword, they're actually fairly competent in melee. So we're just going to overwhelm them here by sheer force, right? The other part that's tactically accomplished here is now we are capturing the ridge, right? If this is capture the... What was it when we were kids or something like that? It was like called Capture the Mountain or something like that. That's basically what we're doing. We are getting up on this valley, or out of this valley, and capturing the top of this hill, by force if necessary, right? And this is where there is a little bit of brute force necessary. Less tactics at this stage and more brute force. But part of the reason that works is that their vanguard is dead, and ours is mostly up standing upright, ready to go. These troops are fresh, most of them are uninjured, and so we fly into battle against these weaker troops, and the screen is all green, right? Now once we have this ridge, the first thing we want to do is we want to set up our archers. I've got to drag them. I had a couple following. I had a couple that were just way back there. And this will happen to you when you're commanding 8 units. But the first thing I need to do is set up archers on this ridge and then send infantry down to assault the next attack. Right? Anytime you gain elevation, that's where you want to spread your archers out and let them just deal death from above. So a little break in the action here as our troops move up, and I I take care of a few of these skirmishers to the side. The next enemy division is already within range, so our archers can't really get fully positioned, but that doesn't really matter. Right? At this stage, again, brute force, we're looking at level, tier 3, tier 4 troops at most. And our archers, they are standing there and shooting, right? You can see in the death span, there's plenty of Battanium Fiend champs and other archers laying waste to the enemy. Had this battle gone on a lot longer than I expected, we would take this ridge, force our infantry forward, and then our archers would be shooting from a very safe position for the rest of the battle. Alas for the enemy in this case, their morale is utterly devastated, right? Their famous vanguard of tough aserai forces got liquidated like they were a Sears outlet, and we advanced on them like a Fuhrer. They were out of here, right? This is another one of those situations where you don't even have to fight the full enemy force because your attack was so overwhelming that the enemy's morale is destroyed, and they would rather all run like the wussies that aserai forces are. No, I jest. The aserai forces in my own campaign are probably my most fierce opponent. Just in case, right, in case this force turns and decides to come back up the hill, I'm spreading archers here, but again, this battle is very much over. There's a few cavalry sort of trying to put on a show of gamesmanship by fighting, but the rest of their troops are all heading off into the forest. So hopefully this is a nice example for folks who've never seen either a kill box, perhaps, and that little stall. Sometimes that's the AI telling all their troops the best way to hightail out of there. Right, that little delay is them ordering 400 guys to all run and have a picnic somewhere. Anyway, so hopefully this was a nice demonstration of folks of essentially a combination of two tactics. You're using a combination of kiting and a kill box to completely obliterate a superior or at least a competent force. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe, ask questions, critique, whatever you'd like to do, and I will see you folks next time.